The Lost Art with Andrew Cox podcast. Marine Corps League and Till Valhalla Project Ambassador. Now streaming on all major podcast platforms. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast that has given a voice to our veterans. The Lost Art with Andrew Cox. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Lost Art Podcast, that podcast giving a voice to our veterans. I'm your host, Andrew Cox, and today we're having another veteran story. But before we get into the episode, are you enjoying the podcast? And make sure you hit up the website. That's thelostart.podbean.com. Go check us out, see what we're all about. There are a couple ways you can help support this podcast. You can become a patron with a monthly donation, or you can purchase some merchandise, get you a shirt, a hat, something like that. But everything you do for us helps us in getting our veteran voices out for all to hear. Also, a big shout out to the Till Valhalla Project out there doing amazing things. Please go check them out. Check them out at tillvalhallaproject.com. Are you a Marine veteran? Are you missing that bond you had on active duty? Then I have a place for you. Join the only congressionally chartered Marine Corps veteran service organization, the Marine Corps League. Get that brother and sisterhood back in your life. Become one of the fewer, the prouder, a Marine Corps League member. All right, we're back here. We got Mike Fallon again. How you doing today, Mike?
Hey, Jay, I'm having a great day. And before we start,
Yeah.
let me just give a big salute to the Marine Corps League and your job as an ambassador. Let me give you a second salute. This is the 75th anniversary for all our vets from Korea. So the Korean vets, a big salute, brothers.
Absolutely.
You guys paved the way for us. Hey, Jay, I'm done with my salutes. I'm ready to do whatever you want to do.
Well, shoot, let's go ahead and jump into it. And I think we left off in the 70s. So you can go ahead and tell us where we're at and where we're going now.
Well, great, AJ. Thank you. I think we're at 78, and I am posted as a United Nations military observer.
Mm-hmm.
And the Israelis have just kicked off Operation Litani, which is a 2-division move from northern Israel and push their boundary from the armistice from 1947 blue line up to the Litani River, effectively pushing the Palestinian rocket range further away from the kibbutzes and the farms of northern Israel. That was their military objective. The Israeli-Lebanese Mixed Armistice Commission, or ILMAC, maintains 7 permanent OPs along the blue line. So when Operation Litani kicked off, I was sitting in an OP called RAS, R-A-S, next to a little ville called Ras Ahana, and myself and my Belgian counterpart were observing the buildup for 2 days behind the fence line. The fence was a double barbed wire, a double strand of wire, along with a Roman plowed area, and we could see the tanks and the self-propelled 155s building up. They kicked it off that morning. I think it was 14 March of 78. And they first pushed to knock the OPs out so we would not be reporting to the United Nations. So after we got shelled with the 155 barrage of 8 to 10, of course, we were in a bunker about 3 stories below the ground. We came out and they politely detained us.
Yeah.
And said, we'll give you a ride back to the Metula Town Jail, which is the northernmost city in Galilee and Israel.
Yeah.
Where we had to kind of sit on the sidelines, got to order food off the deli menu from across the street. and wait for the UN higher command via New York City back to Government House in Jerusalem to affect our release. So we were released. We immediately took a taxi cab to Jerusalem and reported into Government House. We were initially debriefed by Colonel Thomas Leverett, who was an Army colonel and the senior UN military observer from the United States.
Hmm.
And he was double hatted as the G3 of the United Nations Truce Supervision Organization, which is the organization charged with monitoring all the truces in the Middle East
Right.
for the UN. And him and his my Marine brother, Major Dick Ricotta, and when I was done with that, they summarized and then took me up to General Erskine, who was the commander of UNSO, 3-star Nigerian commander trained at Sandhurst. And we gave him the short debrief. That night, Dick and I went out on the town in Jerusalem. I think we ended up at the King David Hotel at their main bar and
Hmm.
shared a few drinks. The next day, I went up to Coast Road, northern town in Israel, Nahariya, by a UN vehicle. The Coast
Okay.
Road was 2 lanes. And when I got there, the 2 lanes heading north on the Coast Road were blocked, and actually traffic stopped with a military supply convoy of the IDF brigade that had pushed up the Coast Road. So I got out of the UN vehicle and hiked uphill to the ridge line that is the Nakura crossing, where the
Hmm.
blue line is of the Coast Road. Had just walked along the convoys uh, north of the blue line in Lebanon, the old Lebanese uh, truck inspection station and tax station,
Hmm.
and where they check documents when the borders open, had been taken over by ILMAC, the Israeli Lebanese Mixed Armistice Commission, as a radio relay coast road checkpoint. Was manned by four UN people.
Hmm.
They were still there, but they were under guard by the Israelis and were not allowed to transmit. I walked up and said hello to my UN brothers, had a cup of coffee, um, picked up a different UN partner from another country,
Hmm.
and proceeded to walk inland about a kilometer and then walked through the orange groves north, parallel to the coast highway, uh, probably 10 kilometers or so, get on a little hill where we could observe the coast highway roundabout
Hmm.
and the roundabout east exit. The north and south exit was the 2-lane coast highway. Uh, to the east, heading north to Beirut, is the Mediterranean Sea. Uh, to the west, you're flanked by Piedmont orange groves,
Hmm.
and the roundabout's the last highway feature before the Litani River. And
Okay.
the Litani River ran east-west, basically just north of the Crusader port of Tyre, Tyre, and the roundabout west went to Tyre. When Operation Litani kicked off, there were 4 axes of advance that each followed 3 macadam roads and a dirt road, equally spaced from east to west, and the Israelis put a mechanized brigade on each of those axes,
Hmm.
supported by self-propelled 155 Artillery tanks.
Nice.
They simultaneously helo lifted members of the parachute brigade in and seized the three bridgeheads. There were 3 bridges over the Litani.
Mm-hmm.
They seized each of those, and then the mech troops were supposed to link up with the paratroopers. That worked on the 3 inner routes. The coast route, the mech troops were stopped south of the roundabout,
Mm.
about 300 meters, and the bridge was north of the roundabout, about 300 meters. The Crusader town of Tyre was on a spit of sand. It was really a former little island that the Crusaders built a castle on, and that was their port city to support Damascus at the time of the
Okay.
Crusaders. And they built within line of sight Crusader capital watchtowers north of the Litani River at each place so they could use signal fires to signal from the port all the way to Damascus. So
Mm-hmm.
every time their train feature demanded a watchtower, there was a watchtower. More to talk about a famous Crusader fort called Chateau Beaufort later in the
Okay.
discussion. So we're now, myself, my partner, we're sitting in an orange grove eating oranges, overlooking the roundabout, which is held by a faction of the Palestine Liberation Army, the PLA. The
Mm-hmm.
faction was the PLFP. And then those 2 organizations were armed militias of the Palestine Liberation Organization, which had their major refugee camp just north of the 3 bridges,
Mm-hmm.
about 200,000 Palestinians. And Yasser Arafat was the head of the political organization, the PLO, and he was the commander of the PLA, but not the PLFP. More on that
Okay.
in a minute. They held the Crusader fort of Tyre, and then there were 2 new apartment buildings. I want to remember them 5 to 7 stories high on the eastern section of the roundabout.
Mm-hmm.
And those apartment buildings had PLFP infantrymen in them with Sager missiles. Now, a Sager missile then, 1978, was a state-of-the-art anti-tank weapon out of Eastern Europe that came in a suitcase. It was controlled with a joystick and wire, so
Mm-hmm.
kind of like our TOW missile, but
Okay.
half the size of it. Our TOW was in size was twice as big as a suitcase Sager.
Mm-hmm.
But these boys had many suitcases, and their goal, which they achieved, was to rain 7, 8, 9 Sagers at a time, kind
Mm-hmm.
of like today's analogy would be a swarm of drones. This
Mm-hmm.
was a swarm of Sagers on the point tank of the mechanized column that's coming up the coast road. Now, the mechanized column had orange groves on both sides of the 2-lane highway. So the
Mm-hmm.
tank maneuver room was ditch for irrigation left, ditch irrigation right, both of which might mean they get stuck, or 1 of 2 lanes. If a Sager couldn't penetrate especially the front armor of the Israeli tank, but if it
Mm-hmm.
hit the road wheel at the tread, you could get a mobility kill. Well, if you
Okay.
mobility killed the first tank and you
Mm-hmm.
mobility killed the second or third tank trying to come around it, now the coast road's blocked.
Right.
And the column of 200 fighting vehicles, counting the APCs, which were M113s that
Mm-hmm.
US had provided, and then the logistics trucks, that train went all the way back to Israel, all the way back to the town of Nahariya, where I had started walking.
Hmm.
Operation Litani went for 8 days.
Okay.
UN Security Council Resolution 425 and 426 called for a ceasefire. The Israelis had achieved their military objective of pushing the PLO out of southern Lebanon to the north side of the river, everywhere except the roundabout and the Crusader town of Tyre,
Mm-hmm.
Tyre, and that became known as the Tyre Pocket. And when the
Okay.
ceasefire went down, the PLO had that, the Israelis had everything south. So the UN negotiated. There was a ceasefire put in place. The Israelis agreed on day 8. The PLO did not, because there was a disconnect politically between the very radical PLFP, read
Mm-hmm.
the jihadists to the far right, and the PLA. The Mixed Armistice Commission in Beirut was chaired and run by the French.
Okay.
And the French colonel knew Yasser Arafat. So he suggested back to the UN that why don't they UN hold a meeting with Arafat and see if they can get a ceasefire.
Mm-hmm.
And that was approved in New York. I'm sure it was approved by the US. I don't think at the time the Israelis got a vote on that one, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I got the tasker to support a French UNMO and another American UNMO, Navy lieutenant, who was a foreign area specialist and a level 4 Arabic language speaker, to go visit Mr. Arafat and set up the meet. So
Okay.
on day 9 in Beirut, the French colonel met with Yasser Arafat in an undisclosed hotel. There is a video out there. It used to be floating around of Arafat and his bodyguards coming into the room. But basically, he agreed to a ceasefire. And the terms that the French colonel, who had been living in Beirut for 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
basically was that he told Arafat the UN would recognize the PLO as a political organization, but Arafat had to get control of all the factions.
Mm.
That was the quid pro quo. Arafat formed Fatah that night, if it wasn't already formed, basically his strong arm militia police force,
Mm-hmm.
who then went at it with the PLFP and arrested the 2 leading members, and then came back and told General Erskine. Now, General Erskine had flown up to Beirut. When you leave Jerusalem, you can't fly to an Arab country. The United Nations runs its own UN airlines, white planes
Mm-hmm.
with big UN written on them.
Right.
You fly from Tel Aviv out to Cyprus,
Mm-hmm.
Cyprus International. Then you get on another UN plane, fly into Beirut, Ellen. So it's like a pool shot, bank shot.
Right.
Erskine, Erskine came in there. We facilitated the meeting. The colonel in charge of the Israeli-Lebanese Mixed Armistice Commission, chairing that commission, chartered in 47, negotiating the ceasefire, and they established the United Nations interim force in Lebanon, which would be a United Nations force to monitor the new ceasefire. And so
Okay.
both sides agreed to the ceasefire, and the PLO had to agree to stay north of the Litani. The Israelis had to agree to pull out and go back south of the blue line, the 47 armistice. And in the buffer zone, the United Nations interim force would have the northern half of the buffer zone, and then another army called the Southern Lebanese Army, which was commanded by a Christian Lebanese army major by the name of Haddad. He would keep the southern buffer, and that was agreed to by everybody. So UNIFIL number 1, which means the first 6 months, UNIFIL 2 is the second 6 months, on infinitum, had to be stood up from scratch. Member countries had to donate forces. So in the interim, myself and 4 other UN military observers who are unarmed, that's your protection, you're unarmed, were seconded by the UNSO team to UNIFIL number 1, and I went to the 3 shop that got set up back in Nakura and became the employment officer in the 3 shop for the UNIFIL G3 was a Marine Lieutenant Colonel Obendorfer, Jerry Obendorfer. So he was there. General Erskine got double-hatted, and he became the commander of UNIFIL 1, although he uniquely said Nakura that used porta-johns and ate off the barbecue. Pretty good food, actually, barbecue shrimp. He declared that UNIFIL forward headquarters, and he kept his UNIFIL UNSO headquarters in Government House, where the standard of living, let's say, was high British society. A super opportunity, got to watch the Israeli attack, their failure to use supporting arms properly. Their integration was use each type of armament and deconflict it by time and distance. Not a bad idea for safety, but no real integration between infantry and mech or between artillery and mech. Everything happened, artillery barrage for a half hour, stop, tank advance with tank only, half hour, stop, then mech come up and support, full stop, evaluate, move the next 200 to 500 meters in the orange grove as you moved north to where they got stopped by the rain of Sager missiles coming out of those 2 apartment buildings. The tanks would fire at the apartment buildings, try to get them in the corner to knock down the construction of them. The artillery would shoot at them. They actually brought some naval gunfire up from their small boats because it was right there. And what happened was the top 2 floors collapsed and the bottom 2 floors collapsed, and the 2 or 3 floors in the middle remained stable enough and you could crawl into them on your belly. These Sager guys kept shooting Sagers at them, and they couldn't get close to them. So
Wow.
the tier pocket manned by the PLFP held until the ceasefire, and then at the ceasefire line, everybody stayed in the ground they had. When the UN battalions deployed in, and it took about 30 days before we started airlifting the battalions in.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S., of course, provided all the airlift. The battalions came into Beirut International or Damascus International, 8 battalions, 1 battalion a week. The deployment team would meet them at the airhead
Mm-hmm.
and lead them with a Jeep Wagoneer with big blue UN flags
Right.
back down to the buffer zone where they would take over almost a relief in place. The IDF, as the IDF pulled out and moved south on the other side of the border. And
Hmm.
so it took about 2 months to get Unifil 1 in place. And then Unifil 1 was stood up. So for a young Marine captain
Mm-hmm.
to have the opportunity to watch from the sidelines, but let's say we're 1 seat behind center court at the basketball game,
Mm-hmm.
because of course tonight we have the Indiana Pacers going against the Oklahoma Thunder. And since you're just back from the Marine Corps League in Oklahoma, you're probably rooting for the Thunder there, AJ. But
Well, I
anyway,
actually live in Oklahoma, but I don't even watch basketball. So the Oklahoma Thunder was not a team whenever until I got back here. So
I hear you. The analogy is only those expensive seats that the owners and
yeah.
the celebrities sit in got to eat fresh oranges and watch the Israelis who were in most people's mind in 1978 and most military mind were unstoppable because they had
Mm-hmm.
won every war that they had been in,
Right.
and to watch them get stopped was a real education for me, and then my eye opening
Mm-hmm.
to the asymmetric use of missiles versus tanks. And of
Right.
course, inside our own Marine Corps, we've had the missile guys versus the tank guys,
Mm-hmm.
intellectual, tactical discussion for the last 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the missile guys intellectually won that
Yeah.
because in force development, the Marine Corps has shed its tanks, partially because of the missile environment of today's battlefield,
Right.
which is one scenario and not the entire scenario of back to the Israeli failure of not using combined arms.
Mm-hmm.
I could make the argument that we're forgetting, we, the Marine Corps, combined arms, when we give up that protected pillbox, the tank. There's a way to keep missiles off tanks asymmetrically.
Mm-hmm.
That's with you know aviation. That's with drones in air. It's also with
Mm-hmm.
machine guns. We will not digress into a Marine Corps discussion. That's for another fireside chat, possibly.
Yeah.
Force
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
force deployment 2023. So young Fallon as a captain is sitting there with my Belgian counterpart. We watched the Israelis stopped anyway, and then on the day 9 of the invasion, get to observe the General Erskine Yasser Arafat meeting in Beirut to
Mm-hmm.
see the political side. Um, there was tensions for the next 6 months. Um, each side violated the buffer area with different types of ordnance harassment,
Mm-hmm.
but it basically held. Part of after that got established, Ilmac still had a mission to monitor the ceasefire. Now not only the 47 ceasefire, but now the 78 ceasefire. Different line, the lines of the Litani River.
Mm-hmm.
So Ilmac decides, this is the French colonel in Beirut,
Mm-hmm.
over coffee and beignet, decides we need to establish, build new OPs north of Litani. So
Mm.
we looked at the map, and 5 two-man patrols, all belonging to Ilmac, got to go out, set up the first one, and I got to pick, because I wanted to go there and hadn't been there, Chateau Beaufort, which is in the
Okay.
northern, it's in the northern dogleg turn.
Mm-hmm.
So the Litani River at Tyr flows from the east straight west, straight towards Mount Hermon, but before it gets, and it's fed by Hermon,
Mm-hmm.
it drops into the back of valley that's a north-south valley, and the river turns 90 degrees and goes straight north. It actually crosses underneath the Beirut-Damascus highway, which runs
Hmm.
east-west. But in that dogleg left, if you're teeing off at Fortress Tyre, they built a Crusader castle that
Uh-huh.
was the midpoint between their stronghold in Damascus and their port city, to give them supplies from Istanbul. Of course, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't called Istanbul then. It had a different name with the Eastern Empire. That was about a 20-story building made out of stone and brick on the high side,
Mm-hmm.
which was on the low side, which was the northern side. When you
Okay.
went to the southern side, you had those 20 tiers, but then you had the 500-foot cliff straight down to the river.
Wow.
And so it had a dominating visual view of all of southern Lebanon. And
Right.
you could see Metula, where Major
Mm-hmm.
Haddad was. You could see, well, Major Haddad was in Marjayoun. That was the Christian stronghold, southern Christian stronghold, north of the Good Fence. South of the Good Fence is Israeli town of Metula. You could
Mm-hmm.
easily, with a pair of 750s, see both. You could see the blue
Wow.
line. Great OP. Um, Stayed there about 2 weeks, getting ready to do our flip where the 2 new guys are supposed to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And the PLO was upset that the UN was reporting ceasefire violations.
Okay.
They thought the reporting was one way, so they closed the highway, which means they put up checkpoints, which are there all along to check who was going,
Mm-hmm.
because they physically controlled. So what they said, UN, you can't move. So now I'm a detainee with my counterpart by the PLO in Chateau Beaufort. And we run out of food, and so we have 2 stories below us. We have a PLA, Palestine Liberation Army OP, which
Uh-huh.
is there on their ground. They're watching across the river. They got lamb. They got lamb coming in every night. So we started eating dinner with them.
Nice.
It was nice. And it was better food, lamb and rice
Yeah.
in chiffon. I'm saying it right. Uh, Spices, yellow
Okay.
chiffon spices, yellow
Mm-hmm.
rice, yellow sticky rice. I still love it. I got sick. I got diarrhea and I developed dysentery.
Okay.
And lasted, I don't know, about a week.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, my Unmo brother got a radio message out to Nakura and to Unifil and said, hey, Unmo's down. He needs to medevac. And the road's closed. You got to put pressure this time on the PLO. So it goes to New York,
Mm-hmm.
comes all the way back to Ilmac, the French colonel that I worked for. But
Mm-hmm.
we were out of radio contact for 3 weeks. He just assumed we were off goofing off or something. I don't know. So he
And you
puts
were on
pressure.
vacation.
Yeah, he puts pressure on the PLO. And so the PLO send an ambulance to save face. They won't open the roads. They send a Red Crescent ambulance with PLA members in it
Yeah.
from their camp, which is north of Chateau Beaufort, in a city that begins with N. That's their city that I'll think of in a minute, maybe. Big city of 50,000 Palestinians. And I get taken out by road ambulance. My partner comes with me. We go to the one hospital there.
Mm-hmm.
The surgeon comes in great English says, you must be pretty important because the chairman told me personally to get you healthy. The chairman meaning the chairman of the PLO.
Yeah.
So I said, who are you? And I said, well, I'm the chairman's brother, but I am a physician and I'll get you healthy. He shut me up with antibiotics or gave me some clean rice. And a couple of days later, I got to go back to Beirut and report into my
Wow.
French colonel, who was nice enough to give me a few days off. And
Okay.
so in those days, when I wasn't on patrol in southern Lebanon,
Uh-huh.
meaning in a Jeep Wagoneer with my partner, I lived in Beirut and I lived in an old hotel
Okay.
called the Charles Hotel. And the Charles Hotel was just north of the port city. And in Beirut, the city and the port at that time were divided between the Muslims and the Christians.
Mm.
So they each could have part of the port. It was a ceasefire they worked out for themselves. The Charles Hotel was about 4 blocks from the dividing line that anchored itself in the Beirut port,
Mm-hmm.
run by a Lebanese Christian.
Okay.
He went by the name of Sam, and I can't remember his last name. So when I checked in to the French contingency coming up from Cairo, and they said, well, you should really go check in with your American brothers. I talked to the master guns who was in charge of the Marine security guard at the embassy.
Mm-hmm.
He said, hey, Captain, Charles Hotel, tell Sam I sent you. I said, that's good enough for me. I said, how do you know about this place, Master Guns? He said, well, before it heated up 3 months ago, that's where I lived, and the Charles Hotel was the Marine house for the
Oh, yeah.
Marines and the Marine security guard detachment. And he
Uh-huh.
says, you just tell Sam anytime you want to open the bar. I hadn't seen nobody. Says, where's the bar? Oh, we built it in the basement next to the bomb shelter. So
Nice.
if there was anybody who was shelling the port, you could be in the bar and you were just as well okay.
Yeah.
Great little Marine bar, a lot of plywood, dim lights, lots of Johnny Walker, lots of beer from many European countries,
Very
and
nice.
all kinds of Marine Corps and Navy plaques. Of
Okay.
course, everybody that coming through in the old days, the embassy, they would just put them up at the Charles Hotel. That was
Mm-hmm.
where the Marine House was. Marines lived on 3 or 4 floors. When it got heated, the Marines moved inside the embassy. So the
Okay.
embassy was a walled compound. The ambassador lived about a half mile away in a guarded villa. So the
Mm-hmm.
Marines then guarded the compound and they guarded the villa of the ambassador's house.
Okay.
There was a tense truce in Beirut there in 78. The shooting then was down in South Lebanon between the PLO and the Israelis. So I
Okay.
finish up. I got a couple of days off and enjoyed myself and finish up there and go back on patrol, which means getting a Jeep Wagoneer and going back down and smiling at everybody. Now they're all
Mm-hmm.
armed at every checkpoint. So you stop at every checkpoint and you show them credentials. And this
Mm-hmm.
is a great UN military observer trick, and it's why you got multiple pockets: left pocket, right pocket, inside pocket. Depending on who manned the checkpoint, you tried to guess which credentials were the best ones to get through the checkpoint. So
Nice. Yeah.
if if you looked at it and it was a PLO checkpoint, you showed them
Uh-huh.
a letter signed by Yasser Arafat, and you were like gold. But
Okay.
if you guessed wrong, and it was
Uh-huh.
a PLFP checkpoint,
Uh-huh.
they might be pissed off at the chairman that week. You might have to drink tea for a while they decided whether they're going to let you through or if they're going to steal your car. So
Oh,
the
wow.
way they built up their motor pool in South Lebanon was to steal UN vehicles
Mm-hmm.
and then just repurpose them as a PLFP or a PLA vehicle. They take a can of spray paint, and on the white outside, they would spray over the blue UN,
Mm-hmm.
and then write some Arabic signs, take the blue flags off, and then you had to hitchhike or take a cab uh,
Oh, jeez.
back into the UN. But
Right.
giving up giving up a vehicle versus trying to be a hero when there's 7 teenagers standing around with an AK-47
Yeah.
and you're unarmed, you tell jokes and you learn to smile. Uh, I had, I averaged, I was there uh, 10 months and lost 9 vehicles, about one a month.
No
And
kidding.
oh, yeah, they had a huge motor pool. I
Yeah.
actually, I actually took one back one Saturday afternoon. They took one at the Latani Bridge
Mm-hmm.
north of the tire roundabout. So I walked down to the tire roundabout in the tire and went into their motor pool. They just took another one to drive down to Nakura, and I told the dispatcher there they could pick their vehicle up at the Nakura roundabout. So I mean there weren't many roundabouts, no traffic lights down there on the
Yeah.
coast road, but there's a roundabout at Nakura where we had our radio relay and our
Mm.
Southern Road checkpoint for the ILMAC.
Right.
When I was done, I, uh, I you sponsor the next American in. I had the good fortune of the guy I sponsored coming in was a Marine captain named Nick Pratt,
Okay.
and in Marine reconnaissance circles and infantry circles, Nick is one of the legends. He's now rest in peace, has passed. from a massive, I think, heart attack or stroke a couple years back.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to sponsor him and write letters to him, pick him up at the airport, get him set up. And then I had set orders to 2nd Marine Division, in which I was happy to be going back to because, it's now 1979 and I haven't been with the infantry grunts since 1969, 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So, I shouldn't have been worried about it, but you got to kind of think forward a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might say careerist. I really just wanted to go back to the infantry
Mm-hmm.
and was happy to be going to the 2nd Division. So I'm going to take a break,
Okay.
get a sip of water here, see
Yeah.
if you got it, see if you got any questions
Well, I
about
got a
my beautiful UN tour. Over to
Yeah,
you.
well, I've got to be honest with you that when you look at what you saw, especially, the Israelis that are coming in, you saw the maneuvers, you saw everything that was going on. What an educational piece for you, as a Marine infantry officer, being able to see that in real time and see, how they were able to stop them and stuff like that. I mean, that's an incredibly powerful tool you had.
Yeah, and you're surprised how much you learn visually. You forget that we come into this world,
Mm-hmm.
we learn those first 0 to 4 years visually, hearing, and audio before our parents teach us how to read.
Right.
And then after that experience, I now had 3 wars or 3 types of war
Mm-hmm.
to compare what I read. And so, as a professional, always trying to read, but now I had my experience in South Lebanon, and then my experience as just a basic grunt as a 2nd lieutenant in the infantry, be it rice paddy grunt, and then I
Mm-hmm.
get experience as a jungle marine, a different environment as a jungle marine.
Right.
Uh, so that base of experience set up my personal beliefs about training and
Mm-hmm.
and what was important as far as the skill set for young Marines.
Right. Wow. I mean, it's just so incredible to me, the steps that you have taken, throughout your career to that point. Uh, each step is just, a bigger building step or building stone for the next thing. Uh, so it's just incredible.
I think that our institution uh, brings people along and gives them opportunities,
Hmm.
and different officers and enlisted Marines that elect to stay and become professionals.
Hmm.
They each get a career path in a good way where the experience blocks are supposed to be building blocks. And sometimes you don't realize what a good building block it is till years later, and
Hmm.
you're in a situation, and your situation, the little alarm bell goes off and says, "This is the time to drink tea. You should
Yeah.
take a deep sucking breath, suck some air through the molars, smile, and see if you can sit down and drink tea."
Yeah.
Um, rather than uh, a trait that I have been accused of having, bullheaded, straightforward. And
Yeah.
sometimes that is always a way to go with the hammer. It's
Yeah.
not always the best way to go with the hammer.
Right.
Yeah.
I like it. Oh man. So they send you back to Second Marine Division, and then what were you doing when you went back there?
Well, the goal was to get to the infantry.
Hmm.
Um, the second division at the time, uh, the three regiments each had a mission.
Mm-hmm.
The Prima Donna Regiment in those days on the East Coast, I'm retired now, I can say that, was the 8th Marines, because
Okay.
the 8th Marines had the med, and
Uh-huh.
they sourced the battalions in the 8th Marines, sourced the Marine Amphibious Units Infantry Battalion, the MAUs, the MAUs that went to the med for 6 months.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, that was a real world mission
Mm-hmm.
that got you out of Swamp Lejeune, where the
Yeah.
Liberty, I mean, come on, Court Street, that's 2 blocks long in downtown Jayville, has got 20 bars,
Yeah.
10 laundromats, and 5 barbershops. That might be good for doing laundry and drinking a
Yeah.
beer, but in those days, there were no women on Court Street. There
Yeah.
were only uh, lance corporals and PFCs um, drinking beer and
Getting
doing
in trouble.
doing laundry.
Yeah.
The second Marines mission was the northern flank. NATO was big then. They did
Mm-hmm.
an annual exercise in uh, the northern plain of Germany and Holland,
Okay.
and then the 6th Marines had the Air Alert. They had the Air Alert Battalion and the Air Alert Regiment
Okay.
and the Air Alert Company. I should have started with companies. The Air Alert in the Marine Corps, we still have it today. The Air Alert Company's got 6 hours to be in the well of an airplane going somewhere in a crisis is first in.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Air Alert Company doesn't get liberty to go to town. When you're sitting at 6 hour alert package, uh, you might be off, but you're in the barracks or you're training.
Yeah.
Um, the Air Alert Battalion, usually 24 hours to close in the objective, and the regiments, 36 hours. Those are the old numbers from 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I won't uh, talk today's capabilities. Planes are better, Marines are better, movement's better, but we still have alert units that have to respond.
Right.
So I was fortunate, and I was assigned to the 1st Battalion, 6 Marines.
Okay.
At the time, the 2nd Battalion had the air alert. I got there in time to pick up a rifle company, and I picked up Bravo Company 1-6.
Mm-hmm.
We had about 100 Marines, and the battalion commander was a Vietnam war horse by the name of Thomas Campbell, a,
Okay.
a great Marine, later a second tour Vietnamese Marine Corps advisor. So you know a Marine's good if he was a Vietnamese Marine Corps advisor, officer enlisted. They're top
Mm-hmm.
3% type people. Um, we picked up a one ship Caribbean cruise for 3 months. So since I was senior captain,
Mm-hmm.
the colonel said, "Hey, you get it." So the company got beefed up to proper strength,
Mm-hmm.
and I picked up an amphibious tractor platoon, which
Okay.
was which was great.
Mm-hmm.
10 Amtraks, a engineering platoon, and a reconnaissance platoon, and we called it a Colt. That's not a Colt 45 beer, AJ. So don't get excited. Colt stands for company, big C,
Uh-huh.
small O, landing team,
Got it.
company
Okay.
landing team. And we embarked up at Morehead City,
Uh-huh.
there, right there next to Atlantic Beach, by up close to Cherry Point,
Yeah.
on a landing ship tank, an LST.
Yeah.
Wow. What a great ship. What a great capability. Wish we had it today.
Mm-hmm.
Shallow water capability all the way to where it could beach itself, drop the front ramp, and
Uh-huh.
you could drive off an LST ramp straight onto the beach. So it had a front well deck that held the 10 Amtraks.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had the rifle company and our 3 attached platoons.
Mm-hmm.
So I was CO of troops, another experience when you go to sea.
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody was a motivated, squared away Marine in the late 70s. We still were we were still cleaning out McNamara's 100,000 and
Yeah.
some drug problems, and we don't have to go down that lane.
Yeah.
But my first sergeant, before we left, my first sergeant came in and said, "Hey, sir, you're going to be the CO of troops, right?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, you know what that means?" I said, "Yeah, I'm the senior Marine on the ship." "Oh, no, sir. That means at office hours, you can award bread and water." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I don't believe you." I said, "Go get the UCMJ." So he goes and gets it. He shows it to me. So he says, "Okay, we got a couple of lads that if we weren't going afloat, I'd be bringing them to you as a company commander to go to office hours. You know,
Yeah.
UA, right? Camp
Uh-huh.
Lejeune. What Marine didn't swoop? Swoop is a Camp Lejeune word. All Camp Lejeune Marines know what it means. We're
Yeah.
going down and hitchhiking to the Jersey Shore, to Philly, New York City
Uh-huh.
on a 72-hour weekend.
Mm-hmm.
We had Marines try to do it on a 48, and they'd meet at the Washington Monument. The last pickup car of 6 Marines pick them up at the Washington Monument at midnight,
Oh,
and
geez.
this is pre interstate, and try to make Camp Lejeune by 6 a.m. formation. You can't do it.
Wow.
So they come in at 8 o'clock in the morning and might be UA driving all night at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So he said, "I'm going to save a couple for when we get on the ship." I said, "Okay." So I went and visited. I went and visited the XO of the battalion, and he said, "I don't think that's a good idea." He said, "But go see the old man." So I went and had coffee with Lieutenant Colonel Tom Campbell.
Okay.
He closed the door and he said, "Well, you know, the first sergeant shouldn't be holding charges for 2 months because that's not uh,
Timely.
expedient, timely." Right? Thanks.
Yeah.
But he's the first sergeant. He's got to make sure he's got his facts right. So you should let the first sergeant decide. Just tell him your policy is timely. He
Yeah.
gets the charges together, but that you will at sea expect typed 5 copies, typed with the
Yeah.
what's the paper to make copies anyway, and
The carbon.
yeah, and
Uh, yeah.
it better be right. And what the colonel was telling me was give that to the first sergeant. That means first sergeant can make that right in a half hour, or it can take 5 days to get to it typed
Yeah.
right. So we pull out of Morehead City. I guess the first night, I ate dinner privately with the lieutenant commander of the ship, but he's the
Mm-hmm.
captain. He lays down his rules. And then the next day, I meet with the first sergeant. CO Troops got his own office. I mean, it's a
Okay.
bigger office than I had at Camp Lejeune. Pretty
Oh,
cool.
jeez.
And we're sitting in there drinking coffee, and he said, "Okay, we got a problem." So what's the problem? Well, we're going to run some office hours. How many? I got 8 or 9 lined up, and I'm ready to go. But we got a
Oh,
problem.
jeez.
They said, "What's the problem?" He said, "Well, we're supposed to run the brig, and when you find these bastards guilty," I said, "Wait a minute. I haven't found anybody guilty." He says, "You might. You're going to put them in the brig." I said, "I might find them guilty, and somebody might go to the brig. What's the problem?" The ship's band has got all their instruments in there, and that's where they use the space for rehearsals. Now,
Oh,
sir,
jeez.
that's a green space, not a blue space. So on all amphib ships,
Yeah.
blue spaces are owned by the Navy, and
Uh-huh.
green spaces are owned by the Green. And you can go to the load plan and all the way back to when the ship was built to
Uh-huh.
architecture to see who owns what space. And the
Right.
first sergeant says, "Sir, the brig is green space because even if a Navy guy goes in there, we got to guard him." I said, "Well, go ask the chief if you can have it." He said, "Sir, I wouldn't be talking if I didn't ask the senior chief already. They told
Yeah.
me the band is like the skipper's favorite thing because he uses it. First off, it's a volunteer band on a small ship,
Uh-huh.
but those guys at every port, they get to go with the skipper and they get off all the time, and it's a good
Uh-huh.
deal, even if they're lousy.
Yeah.
So we're not winning that one unless you take it up at chain of command." So I said, "Well, got it, got to do what I got to do." So I went and saw the ship's lieutenant, who is a Navy lieutenant. I'm a
Yeah.
Marine captain.
Uh-huh.
So, hey, Doug, hey, I want to get the brig back. Oh, sucking teeth. Man, that's the band. Eh, You could probably get half the engine room, man.
Oh, jeez.
I don't want the engine room. Oh, that's the band. I ain't going there. So, okay. I go see the ship's XO,
Uh-huh.
who was also a lieutenant,
Okay.
my counterpart, senior lieutenant. "Hey, I need the brig." "Why do you need the brig?" "We're going to lock somebody up, and it's full right now." "Oh, shit, that's the band." Well, he said, "I'm not going there." "Well, it's the Navy chain of command. You figure it out." He said, "Nope. You're the CO of troops. You have direct access to the boss." So I waited to dinner that night, and it was just me and
Uh-huh.
the lieutenant commander. And over soup, which was the first course, they said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about the band." He said, "What about the band?" I said, "Well, can some of my Marines play in a band?" "Well, yeah." I said, "Well, that's good. That's good. Okay, thanks." They said, "We got to find another place for them to play." He said, "Why is that?" I said, "Because I want the brig." He goes, "Oh," and he spills his soup. And
Oh, jeez.
he gets on his pants. And a Filipino messman, I'm not being derogatory, that time
Yeah.
in the Navy, the messman, you could join the mess, you could join the Navy to be a
Uh-huh.
messman and
Yeah.
get your citizenship if you lived in the Philippines. And then
Mm-hmm.
you became a galley slave. Anyway,
Yeah.
he's out there trying to clean up. And so finally, by the time we got to dessert, we had negotiated that the band would get a piece of the mess deck, the embarked troops piece, the
Mm-hmm.
piece of that I would provide a piece of green mess deck
Right.
for a piece of green brig. And I said,
Okay.
"Okay, okay." Well, we got the brig. We had to make a rule the band couldn't play during meals because they were that bad. And inside all metal buildings, when the drums started going, you'd have a
Oh,
headache.
yeah.
So they could only rehearse when it wasn't one of the 4 meals going on. Anyway,
Okay.
we get to brig, and I got what I was going to say the kid's name was Shimalunas, but that's not the kid's name. I got a kid out of the south side of Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
and he comes in to office hours, and the first sergeant says, and this kid is big,
Mm-hmm.
and he needs to lose a few pounds, and
Okay.
he had been like 12 hours late, like 2 weekends before we're to embark. I think the
Okay.
last weekend you could have Liberty far away from Camp Lejeune.
Uh-huh.
So we hold office hours, and we would hold 5 or 6 office hours. Kids got fined or got first sergeant's working party was my favorite
Uh-huh.
because you could do a page 11. It didn't really hurt the guy. But this guy, first sergeant, said, "Sir, we got to send a message. Put him on bread
Yeah.
and water." I said, "Okay, bread and water for 3 days."
Ooh.
And there are strict rules. You have
Uh-huh.
to have a log. You have to have a logbook. Um, the officer of the day for the ship has to go down and sign the logbook 4 times a day. Check on the guy. Guy gets to eat 4 times a day. It's all the
Mm-hmm.
water he wants. He gets a hunk of bread 4 times a day. I think those are the rules.
Wow.
Well, we did it, and the kid got out, and he dropped like 12 pounds in 3 days, and which he needed to drop. A lot of it was water weight. He got out and ran his mouth down there in the berthing spaces, and didn't have to use it the rest of that cruise. I don't even know if it still exists today, but I can tell you in my Marine Corps career, one time, one Marine, bread and water. So anyway,
Wow.
we went 3 months in the Caribbean. So we got
Uh-huh.
to, the Navy owned an island called Vieques. And Vieques is an island that's part of Puerto Rico. It's
Mm-hmm.
about 6 miles directly off the mouth of the naval station in Puerto Rico. Then was Roosevelt Roads. Great
Okay.
natural harbor, great natural big U.S. Navy base, and half the island was civilian. The other half was military. Barbed wire fence on post like you're in Oklahoma, 3-string barbed
Mm-hmm.
wire.
Okay.
Uh, from the wire, half of the bottom half were fire maneuver ranges for small arms, and then
Uh-huh.
the last quarter of the island was just an impact area where you could set up 105 howitzers and shoot into the impact area or 81s, or if you were a Navy ship, you could pull up and
Mm.
live fire into the impact area. So
Okay.
super great training area. Marine Reinforced Rifle Company, we get to land
Mm-hmm.
Purple Beach, and the beaches in Vieques kept all the same names. There was a great job for, I think, 11 Marines, and the officer in charge of the Vieques training det was a
Mm-hmm.
Marine major. A Marine major had a house, and he had 11
Nice.
Marines. And you had to check in with him, and like he took care of the place and
Huh.
basically left you alone because you were training. And 11 Marines were like range safety, right? They ran
Mm-hmm.
the range safety tower, so there was an independent range safety guys, and then they were maintenance, and then they were in charge of the relationship with the 200 people that lived on the northern end of the island.
Okay.
Well, I'll never know how it happened, but we are shooting the M60 machine gun on a
Hmm.
fixed line. There's no maneuver, but a cow wandered onto our impact area, and we killed a cow. Oh my God!
Oh
You'd
no.
have thought you'd have thought I was back in Vietnam and killed a water buffalo. It was just as dramatic. So
Oh my God.
I told the gunny, re- report the dead, ceasefire, clean the weapons, everybody go back to the ship. Re- Gave Second Lieutenant Cantu, the junior lieutenant, the investigation,
Uh-huh.
just to teach him. Told the gunny, go report to the range safety gunny. We killed a cow where it is, and that the lieutenant's investigating. Well, shit. The gunny told the major. The major gets in his Jeep. The major comes down there and chews my ass. He goes back over. Fucking dead cow is a big deal. He sends a naval message to the friggin' world. You know, it, it goes to the commander of my ship. Then it
Yeah.
goes to who's part of the Atlantic Fleet, which
Right.
means this is on a 4-star admiral's message board in Norfolk. And then it means it's on a 3-star general's message board called FMF Land.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, Fallon killed a cow. You know, the the Navy had to pay for the cow,
Uh-huh.
and I had to take the investigation and forward it up the chain of command and go through a bunch of reviews. And ultimately, uh, I was held responsible for killing the cow because I wouldn't press charges on Marines who were in training that I thought were doing solid training. And it wasn't like they stitched the cow with 20 rounds. I today honestly believe it was a ricochet, one round. It caught the cow in the head or
The
somewhere,
perfect place. Yeah.
hit hit its spine or something. It was a dead cow. The people of the village made out. I mean, they took the cow and barbecued it, and they got paid for it. Um,
Yeah.
and I got a killed cow remark in my fitness report. I got a 3-month fitness report. The CO of troops, some Navy officer who wasn't even there. I mean, he wasn't even ashore. Anyway,
Oh my God.
uh, a great learning experience. We get back, um, and the good news is we had a 3-month Carib cruise. We all got tans. That's where I first discovered the ABC Islands. That's the 3 islands. Then were colonies for the Netherlands called Aruba, Curacao, and the B is the B island. Aruba, Curacao, and I'll have to think on a hard drive. There was a,
I don't the Netherlands still go down there?
they still go
Is
there.
is
They
it Bermuda?
still, no. Bermuda's a
No.
big island. It's a little small island. They, all of them sued for independence and negotiated independence. And instead of sticking together as 3, they became 3 independent countries, but they still affiliate with the, don't hold me to this, Commonwealth of the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
And so still a big Netherlands influence. But
Yeah.
these 3 islands are 8 miles off the coast of Venezuela.
Oh
So they're
wow. Okay.
they're not really Caribbean. They're very
Mm-hmm.
close to the equator.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get hurricanes, so they're out of the hurricane belt. So
Wow.
today they're huge. Aruba is a huge tourist island.
Right.
Curacao is trying to become a huge tourist island.
Mm-hmm.
Step down, good for. There's now 3 really good hotels and a bunch of houses. The third island that begins with a B is probably some of the best scuba diving in the Caribbean. And so it's
Hmm.
a scuba diver's destination,
Yeah.
but it's hard to get to.
Mm.
Anyway, um,
That's
when we
interesting.
when we went, there was a Royal Netherlands rifle company based in Aruba,
Mm-hmm.
and they were there to guard the Netherlands Shell oil refinery, and it was a Netherlands Shell owned the oil refinery. The
Mm-hmm.
oil came over from the Venezuelan oil fields and got refined there. And so they
Hmm.
were there to guard the oil refinery. So we got to do a joint landing, and that was cool. Then got 3 days of liberty with our
Nice.
Royal Netherlands friends. So each of the Marines teamed up with a Royal Netherlands guy, Marine.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had last day we had Cinderella. I made Cinderella Liberty for the Marines, and for you civilians listening to this, that's midnight. Cinderella,
Yeah.
get it? The slipper. Um, the ship was pulling out at 0600 the next
Mm-hmm.
morning. So I kind of built in a 6 hour buffer.
Yeah.
A little bit after midnight, I'm drinking coffee, and the first sergeant comes up to me and he said, "Hey, sir." And my first sergeant was always a good news, bad news guy. Always said that. "Hey, sir." He didn't even wait for me. "The good news is all the troops are back on the ship, and I am a happy camper. The bad news is you got a problem."
Oh no.
I said, "What's the problem, first sergeant?" He said, "Second Lieutenant Cantu." I said, "Where is Cantu?" He said, "I don't know, sir, but he's not on the ship." I
Oh
said,
no.
shit. So I got the XO and the weapons platoon leaders
Uh-huh.
had just made first lieutenant, I believe. One was named Amos, Amos. I could be pronouncing it wrong. The other was the guy named Greg Wallach. I said, "You guys got 2 hours. Go out in town and find Cantu." They went out in town. They were back at about 02:15. Can't find him.
Oh no.
Okay. So I said, "You know what? I'd already given that guy too many breaks." I said, this is going to ruin his career, but that's it."
Yeah.
So I went and grabbed some couple hours Z. I heard them sounding all the right stuff to pull the ropes.
Uh-huh.
I got it. I got in my utilities and got a cup of coffee. Went up to the bridge, and I'm on the bridge with the CO of the ship, and the ship's lieutenants down on the main deck, and they're doing their thing. And the lookout on the bridge has got binoculars, and he's watching the road to the port, and
Right.
he's on the squawk box, and there's, "Hey, there's a car coming towards the port at very high speed, really very high speed." And when it's burning this thing up, and keep your eyes on it. We're watching it. And didn't stop at the gate for the port, just straight through, barrel straight to the. There's only 2 piers. The number 1 pier was big.
Yeah.
straight down the pier to where the gangplank's already about to come up, sideways skid. It's just a rental car, little 4-door, little Fiat or something, and
Yeah.
you know, out rolls Cantu up the gangplank.
Oh God.
He makes it by about 2 minutes. The
Oh
zero
geez.
the 0600.
Yeah.
So I just said to the captain, I said, I would like permission to take care of this myself, but of course, if you want me to bring him to you, I will. And he said, no, you're the Marine. You got it. And we had taken a month and a half to get down there because that's all the way down by Venice. We were going to take
Yeah.
a month and a half. And we were going to a port call every other day. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
And the band was getting really good because they coming
A
into
lot of
port,
practice time and playing.
they went up to the front. You know, they got to play for everybody coming in. They got to play docking. Then they got to
Mm-hmm.
get off the ship first, play for the captain. And then the
Uh-huh.
captain always told them, come to this restaurant, play for an hour. And you know the rule with bands, if a
Yeah.
band plays at an event, the event coordinator is obligated to
Got to
feed the
feed them.
band the
Yeah.
best thing in the house, you know, and usually
Yeah.
take care of them. In a Liberty port, that was, surf and turf and a beer for the band.
Yeah.
There was like, they had more volunteers to get in the band than guys that couldn't do nothing. I'm blowing a Coke bottle to be in the band. Anyway, I told Cantu, I brought him in with the other two first lieutenants and said, I can't, I'm the CO of troops. I really can't do much to you, but this is going to hurt you. While I think about it, first off, you're freaking grounded. You got no liberty till we get back to Morehead City and get off the ship. You are the officer of the deck at the next 15 ports of call.
Oh wow.
He said, month and a half, big deal.
Yeah.
So we leave that night. The captain says, what'd you do with him? I said, well, for now, he's restricted to the ship and he'll get off when we get to Morehead City, and he's to stand a Marine OD. And if you want him to stand a watch in every port, you can give him a 4-hour watch. And he said, well, that's fair. Okay, we'll do that. It's me, him, and the XO eating dinner. And we're halfway back, and in comes this naval message to the captain of the ship to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's addressed to me, and it's from Sink Lant Fleet to CO of troops. The ship was the USS Harlan County. The CO of troops,
Oh, no
USS
kidding.
Harlan County.
Okay.
It is our understanding that Second Lieutenant Jose Cantu rented a Hertz vehicle in the island of Aruba and has now failed to turn it in. The current charges are $7,000,
Oh,
and
God.
we're going to hold you responsible until the vehicle is turned in. So he had been drinking with a couple of Marines from the Netherlands Marine Corps
Yeah.
who apparently at some hour left the bar, and he didn't want to leave, so he stayed there with his rent-a-car.
Uh-huh.
And then he got somebody at the bar to drive him to the pier and flipped him the car keys and said, turn it in.
Turn it in.
Hurts.
Yeah.
And that local took it home and kept it as his car.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I called Cantu in and gave him this message, and that was followed by a P4. So a P4 message is a personal 4 message, and it's they sit only the person it's addressed to is supposed to read it. Of course,
Right.
the the guys in the signal room all read it. So now there's a P4 message from the 3-star in charge of the Marines to me saying,
Oh no.
you better fix this before you get home. Like 15 days, 2 weeks. So I said,
Oh,
okay. And I went down to Cantu and I said, you got to fix it. You got 2 weeks. What am I supposed to do? I said, well, you got to pay the fine. He says, that's more than buying him a new car. He said, that's highway robbery, sir. That's unfair. I said, look, read this P4. I said, when we get home, I'm throwing you under the bus. That general could put you in Leavenworth. I don't know if he could or couldn't, but
Yeah.
so you got to fix this. How am I going to fix it? I don't know. Go talk to the lieutenants. Figure it out. So the next day he comes back to me. He says, I got it figured out. How's that? Well, 2 of the lieutenants and a gunny are going to give me loans. And then I can wire money to Aruba. I said, the gunny's not giving you no loan. And I went back and talked to lieutenants and I said, tell him to go call his parents.
Yeah.
So we get to the next port. He gets off the ship to make a phone call on the pier. He calls his parents, comes back. The lieutenants come back to me. Lieutenant Mafia, the LPA, the Lieutenants Protective Association. I'm a Marine captain. I've been out of it. I've probably been out of it less than a year, right? Hey, sir, you know where Cantu's from? I said, yeah. He's from Brownsville. Yes, sir. Brownsville, Texas. Like everybody in Brownsville is a dirt farmer. His
Yeah.
parents got no money. He's the rich man because he's an officer of Marines.
Yeah.
And he's broke. I said, well, the LPA better figure it out because the gunny ain't doing this. So they went back and the LPA scrapped up the money. And so Cantu paid $7,000 and
Wow.
got a receipt from Hertz Aruba. So I wrote a report. I didn't put out any message traffic. When we docked in Morehead City, I wrote a report via the chain of command and explained everything and sent it to the 3-star and said that Cantu had been held accountable, restricted for 15 days aboard ship and paid a $7,000 Hertz vehicle fine. He's learned his lesson. The company's satisfied. And he will be formally counseled and double signed, 2 signatures.
Oh yeah.
And if a Marine officer double signs one finished report, you might as well get
career ender.
career.
Yeah.
For those that don't understand, a Marine officer signs a fitness report when he says Section A, the admin stuff is correct. If the remarks are bad enough to be career threatening, the reporting senior is obligated to show it to him. He's obligated to counsel him all the time, but to show it to him, let him read it, then he gets to sign it to say he's read it. And if he wants to make a statement, he can make a statement. So Cantu double signed that puppy, made a statement. I told him, don't make a statement.
Yeah.
I'm making a statement. Well, in the statement, he made what I said was worse. He said, I went to town and got drunk. I said, Lieutenant Cantu, don't put that in. I'm putting it in there. That's what happened. I'm telling the truth.
Oh my God.
He got out of the Marine Corps when he had a 3-year obligation.
Uh-huh.
They did. There are many other Camp Lejeune Second Lieutenant Cantu stories that can be told by a generation of Marines.
Yeah.
But to give the kid credit, stamina and fortitude, he did not get out of the Marine Corps. He joined the
Okay.
reserves. In, late 70s, early 80s.
Uh-huh.
Not every reserve officer billet at the lieutenant level was filled because there was
Uh-huh.
a lot of protests going on. And so he's in Texas. He's in one of the Marine units in Texas, and joined as a second lieutenant. Stayed in the reserves for 35 years and retired as a
Wow.
Marine lieutenant colonel of reserves.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah. And apparently successful in business down in Brownsville. And
Yeah.
I have not talked to Cantu in 50 years. I only wish him well uh, because I know he turned out to be a success. If on the small chance he sees this video, it's meant to teach other lieutenants to come in uh, early off of Liberty. Always give yourself 2 or 3 minutes of buffer before the time you're supposed to be at home. I get back and they say, you're senior enough. You got to go to the 3 shop at battalion. It
Mm-hmm.
it comes to everybody. So I go up and I become the battalion S3.
Mm-hmm.
And about that month, uh, the major's promotion board came out, and I got fortunate enough to be selected for major. So I'm now in a major's billet as the operations officer for Marine Infantry Battalion,
Right.
which is really nice because that's what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So do that for a year. Um, the next year, I actually get promoted to major,
Mm-hmm.
get paid. You can only be rocked to the next rank if you're in a billet that's exposed to people outside the Marine Corps or exposed to command somehow. But as a staff officer at a battalion, I didn't rate being frocked, and getting frocked means you can put them on. You don't get paid. It
Right.
didn't change anything in the battalion. I still was the ops officer, so I learned my job, did my job. The next year, I fleeted up and became the executive officer of the
Oh
battalion
wow.
as a real major,
Mm-hmm.
and the air alert swings around to the 1st Battalion, 6 Marines. So we got a real mission. We can practice. We have inspections, make sure you got everything.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you deploy, you got to be combat ready. The airhead, the airport of departure for the Air Alert Battalion has to be a heavy lift airfield. So in 1980, the Air Alert Battalion APOD, airport of departure there, people, was Cherry Point, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
So the force troops had a standing order to have enough 6-bys to lift the Marine Rifle Company. They had to start lifting in like 3 hours and drive to the battalion and load the Marines on the 6-bys and drive to the APOD.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times we practiced that. And you practice it like at 1 o'clock Saturday night, right?
Yeah.
So everybody gets called. So you have to practice the phone tree. No cell phones. Guy
Yes,
in the
right.
3 shops dialing the thing to, to call the officers and the staff NCOs in. The rifle company that's on 6 hours, they're living in the barracks. So it's
Yeah.
pretty easy. You go down and you tell them to fall out in the company street,
Uh-huh.
take roll, and wait for the 6-bys. You always hope you get a mission because getting away from Camp Lejeune, it's better than sitting there with restricted liberty.
Right.
Uh, and being on a short leash, even if you get base liberty, if you're in the battalion, or you get 12 hours liberty and go around Jacksonville or something, if you're married,
Mm-hmm.
we're supposed to have air alert for 6 months. We're halfway through it. And tradition in those days was you went to the field Monday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Monday morning, you took roll. Uh, you issued gear. Weapons in those days were locked in the armory. Marines
Mm-hmm.
didn't have their weapon. I'm opposed to that, but they were
Right.
all locked in a battalion army. So Monday morning, you issued rifles, pistols, machine guns, got everybody shaped up. One last meal at noon in the mess hall. 1300, you'd march to a training area. Or if
Mm-hmm.
you were really lucky and got helos, you got to helo to a training area. But
Right.
there weren't a lot of training dollars, and the Air Wing had to keep their pilots certified, so most of them went to pilot certification hours.
Mm-hmm.
You got trucks if you were going across New River. The M60 machine gun range was Kilo 305 back then in the
Mm-hmm.
Kilo range area on the south side of New River from Main Side Camp Lejeune. You could get trucks and go around there.
Right.
The good news about going around there is there was also a maneuver area and people would leave you alone. So the routine, you go to the field for the week and you would come home Friday morning
Mm-hmm.
and uh, different people, you went at platoon level, company level, battalion level, and if you're the OPSO, you were coordinating, getting ranges and getting people in and out. If you're the XO,
Right.
you're watching everybody else go to the field and getting stuck. But anyway, on Fridays, you got back by 11.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody went to mess hall for a noon meal, cleaned weapons, 1400, 1500. All the weapons are clean. You get a thumbs up. 100% of the weapons are in the armory. You sound liberty,
Right.
and that meant Marines could swoop. You did so, and whenever you sounded liberty, all the staff NCOs went to the staff club. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it was mandatory. All of the officers went to the officers club,
Yeah.
and the officers had PME, professional military education,
Mm-hmm.
had a legitimate conference room with the officers of that battalion. The three shop had to have somebody set up to give a class, usually 15 or 20 minutes, with
Mm-hmm.
15 or 20 minutes discussion. Keg of beer during the class. Really good news.
Yeah.
When the class was over, the old man usually gave a little 5-minute pep talk,
Uh-huh.
and then he usually went to the main bar. Well, if the
Okay.
old man goes to the main bar, most of the officers, unless they had babysitting duties or volleyball or softball,
Yeah.
they went to the main bar. I mean, that was Marine Corps tradition every
Yeah.
Friday. I'm in utilities at the main bar as the battalion XO, and well, it's probably 6 o'clock by then, 1800.
Yeah.
So I've been drinking beer for 3 hours, talking to somebody I can't remember, and the bartender just starts banging on the bell really hard. 3 ring.
Uh-huh.
Anytime somebody bangs on a bell in a Marine bar, it means it's a violation of
Mm-hmm.
protocol, and whoever's the violation has to buy the bar a round of drinks. There's
Right.
200
Oh,
officers in there, and they're going, "Hurrah!"
yeah.
Well, the bartender, who was a staff sergeant, rightfully saw this second lieutenant coming through the door,
Uh-huh.
and the Marine was covered, had a piss cover on with his
Yeah.
second lieutenant, had failed to take his cover off, and he's banging the bar, and that second lieutenant comes smoking over to me and cracks off a salute that's good as anything. He's banging a bar again because he's saluting inside.
Yeah.
The staff sergeant didn't look. The guy's wearing his Sam Brown belt,
Oh, he's on
and
duty.
he's on duty. You got it. He's got his sword right there, but it's
Yeah.
put away. He says, "Sir, the commanding general wants to see you." I said,
Oh,
"Lieutenant,
geez.
what?" Says the commanding general. Well, hey, I'm the XO, Lieutenant. Sir, I know that. I'm looking around for the CO,
Uh-huh.
right? And uh, the CO is down at the other end of the bar. So I walked down there and I said, take the duty with me. Tell the lieutenant colonel, Tom Campbell, saying, what's going on? The general wants to see Major Fallon. I look at Lieutenant Colonel Campbell. He says, that's pretty clear. You have to go with the OD. I said, where are you going? He says, I'm going home and taking a shower and getting a clean uniform. And as soon as you know what's going on with the general, you either call me or come tell me what's going on. I go see the general.
Uh-huh.
The OD's got a driver. I'm in there. The general's down in a 2-story second Mar Div building right there on the river. I go up to the second floor, go down there like a private reporting in. It's dead. All the lights are off. I bang on his hatch. His light's on. He's there. Enter. I go in front of his desk. Major Fallon reporting. He goes, well, I got a mission. Stand at ease. I got a mission for you. I said, what's that? He says, go home, get some civvies, fly to Key West, Florida. Okay? Do an assessment. What's going on? Call me back. I said, okay? You want to tell me what's going on? Fallon, I don't know what's going on. That's why I'm sending you there. Get your fucking ass out of here and go to Key West. I get the duty officer to drive me to Paradise Point, the officer's quarters.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Campbell's house, 2-story house, nice door. Go up, ring the bell. Mrs. Campbell's expecting me. Comes in. The lieutenant colonel is taking a shower, got his utilities on. Those quarters had a sunroom
Yeah.
at the end of the quarters, through the living room, out to the sunroom.
Right.
Mrs. Campbell says he's in the sunroom. Mike, do you want a beer? And I said, no, ma'am. He said, well, Tom's having a beer. Yes, ma'am. They go out there and what's going on? He said, well, I got to go to Key West, Florida and do an assessment. He said, okay. He says, when your assessment is done, your answer is you need the Air Alert Battalion to solve the situation. I said, what's the situation? He says, how the fuck do I know? You're going down there to find out. But I'm telling you what the answer is. Oh, okay. Now, you better get out of here and get going. So I go back to my house, which is 2 streets away,
Yeah.
take a shower, tell my bride I'm going to Key West, Florida. How are you going to get to Key West, Florida? I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. Phone rings. You know, we only got one phone in the house. It's in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Bride answers the phone. It's my battalion commander.
Mhm.
Says, hey, before you leave, you got to go see the regimental commander. I said to the battalion commander, what's he want? If I knew, I'd tell you. Are you going to be there? No, he didn't ask for me. He says, do not go past go. Go see the regimental commander. And as soon as you're done, drive to my house. Tell me what's going on. I'll give you another beer. Boom. Tell my wife, got my ditty bag. See ya. Don't know when I'll be back. Go to the regimental commander. He opens the door. I don't even get in the house. Because the battalion commander is giving him a full brief
Yeah.
of everything he knows. I'm standing at attention. He says, okay, Fallon, the answer is you need the regimental air alert, the whole regiment, to solve the problem. Yes, sir. What these two leaders were trying to do was get their Marines out of Camp Lejeune, because if you keep Marines on air alert for 6 months, stuck
Yeah.
on Camp Lejeune, you have all kinds of little liberty incidents that are a pain in the
Mm-hmm.
ass. It's no fun for them. It's not good training.
Right.
So anyway, I go out to Jacksonville and get a commercial two-prop plane over to Charlotte, spend the night in the Charlotte airport, get a plane from Charlotte to Atlanta, Atlanta to Miami, Miami to Boca Raton, all commercial
Okay.
planes. I'm paying for it,
Oh, geez.
keeping track. Got my little green
Yeah,
notebook.
that's right.
I got one credit card. I don't remember what the max limit was, but it was like $3,000 or something. Not
Uh-huh.
much. Not like today where they want you to get in debt.
Uh-huh.
So I get to I get to Boca Raton Naval Air Station. The OD meets me. He's got a sedan, military sedan, to take me to Key West, where he set up a meeting with the mayor, the police chief, and the county sheriff.
Okay.
And I said to the Boca Raton Navy guy, I said, what's going on? He said, all these Cubans are coming out of the water and just stopping at Key West. He said, I bet there's 3,000 Cubans there. I said, what? He said, yeah. He said, I don't know. I said, how are they getting there? He said, I guess they're swimming. I don't know. So I go there and meet with the mayor, the chief of police, and the sheriff. And there are Cubans sitting on the curb. At Key West then, it was funky, but it was
Yeah.
backwater. I mean, there's like, there was one-way traffic down this way. You got to the main square at the end of Key West. Captain Tony's bar was sitting on there. And you came back this way one way. There was colonial houses on the two main streets. Then
Mm-hmm.
you went to the beach. I mean, there was an old naval seaplane base to the
Yeah.
side of the harbor.
Okay.
And it was still there. So I talked to these guys. I said, what's going on? He said, Fidel Castro is letting the Cubans leave if they want to leave. And these are all refugees coming over in small boats to get their freedom. And what it was what became known as the Mariel, Meriel boat lift.
Okay.
And the Mariel boat lift were Cuban nationals desiring to get their freedom, going to the port of Mariel, which is the northernmost port, very small fishing village, really,
Mm-hmm.
on Cuba, closest to Key West. It's straight across from Key West, 90
Mm-hmm.
miles. So the 90 miles straight.
Right.
And then they would get to Key West and they say, we want freedom. And so the three Key Western, the three conchs, if you're from Key West, you're a conch. The sheriff, the chief of police, and the mayor said, we're overwhelmed. We called the governor. The governor says he can't take care of it. When the governor declares an emergency, it means it's a federal problem and the feds pay. That's why governors and forest fires and natural
Mm-hmm.
disasters are always quick on the trigger they want feds because
Yeah.
feds activate the checkbook and activate FEMA.
Right.
So that all gets activated. The governor of Florida called the president. The president called the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Chairman had a meeting in the tank. They talked about it in the tank. None of the services wanted it. It was a tar baby. So then the chairman looked around and said, Marine Corps, you got it. You guys say you do windows. You say you got all this fast response. Your problem. So the commandant of the Marine Corps picked up the phone from the tank, called the CG in the 2nd Division, direct, said, you got an air alert battalion, go to Key West. And then he calls Atlantic, talks to the 3-star Atlantic, FF Atlantic, tells them what's going on. That all happened on Friday night, right?
Yeah.
So I got the horrible beer headache from drinking cheap beer all night long. And I'm down there. So I leave the meeting and I go outside and I said, shit, I got to report into the general. The mayor and the chief of police and the sheriff all leave. And no cell phones. They get in their cars and they book.
Yeah.
There's a gas station there. It's got a payphone. I go over there and I go to the head of the line. I just move people out of the way. I'm still in civilian clothes. Then I realize they don't have any money. I go into the cash register. I get a bunch of quarters. I open up my green book. I got the officer of the day's phone number. Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, Saturday, late evening. I call, the OD answers. I say, this is Fallon. I got to talk to the general. Well, he's in his office. They said, okay, mate, here's the deal. I'm going to hang up and I'm going to call back in 10 minutes or 8 minutes. You go down and tell the general that I'm calling this number and have the general walk down the hall. So I can't tell the general that. I said, look, you just go up and tell him I'm going to be on the phone and I'm on a pay phone. And would he please walk down the hall? I said, okay. So I call back in 8 minutes. The phone is answered by the general. The guy's name is Major General David Toomey. Really great warhorse. He goes, Fallon, yes, sir. What's the assessment? I said, sir, there are Cubans all over here. They're in every tree. They're in the trees. I know that. What's the assessment? Oh, I need the Air Alert Battalion. Roger that. You got it. He hangs up. Then I go, he said, shit. So I still got the sedan from the naval base. I drive back to the naval base, talk to the officer of the day, tell him, hey, the Air Alert Battalion's coming to Boca Raton. He says, what's the Air Alert Battalion? So I walk him through all that. I said, I suggest you call the CO of the Naval Air Station and have you got a place I can take a nap and change into my utilities and take a shower? Yeah. So, the next day, C-141s, Air Force, went to Cherry Point, picked up the battalion, fly them down to Boca Raton. We got to move them into Key West. And we clear the streets and we put every Cuban in a seaplane hangar. And the seaplane hangar, we put them in hangar number 1. They all got catwalks on it. And the battalion commander says to me, what's the plan? I said, well, we're going to take over this old seaplane base. We'll run the base and there's barracks to get the sergeant major and I'll get the ops shop set up, get the sergeant major to barracks, blah, blah, blah. He said, before you do that, he said, hey, it's my battalion, Fallon. I'm here now. You relax. I'm giving orders. He goes, go call the division and tell them you want the regiment. Oh, fuck. Yeah. He says, you got to call the G3 shop to bring the regiment. He said, I can't do it. You got to do it because the general told you that you're in charge of the assessment. Same deal. Drop the quarters in the payphone.
Mm-hmm.
Get some OD. I want to talk to the G3. Go through that. Make him come to the phone.
Yeah.
Just a bull colonel of the division. Hey, we need the regiment. Are you sure? Yes, sir. I'm calling you on a payphone. I'm getting ready to drop 2 more. Bing bong, bing bong. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. I want the regiment. Okay. You got him. Hey, we could probably use an air cap. A what? A cap. A CAP. Well, I'll work on it. So Fidel decided to call America's bluff and said, and his people's bluff, said anybody that wants to go can go.
Yeah.
And he facilitated poor people going to Mariel. And then because it's expensive to maintain prisons,
Uh-huh.
and they had a communist system, so on their health system, they had institutions for the insane or partially insane, and
Mm-hmm.
they had a lot of people locked up in what we'd call insane asylums that had one rocker off or half a rocker, and
Mm-hmm.
political prisoners. And he had hardcore prisoners in hardcore prisons. You know,
Wow.
tattoos around the eyes.
Yeah.
So he bust all those dudes to Mariel and put the entire prison population and the insane asylum population with the political population into the water heading for Mariel.
Wow.
So the solution was a joint task force.
Uh-huh.
And since there are a lot of little boats and the Coast Guard boats were the first guys down there, the guy for the Coast Guard Miami district was a Navy captain then. He said, I'm in charge of the joint task force. So everybody said, okay. And he set up the joint task force. Well, the Navy had some minesweepers
Uh-huh.
stationed in Key West. Said, well, we got ships there. We want to be in charge. So the Naval District, I think it was also Naval District Miami, had a 1-star. He came over and said, I'm in charge. Everybody went, okay. The Coast Guard said, not so fast. The Coast Guard Southeastern Region Admiral was in either Charleston, South Carolina, or Norfolk. He flies in. He's got 2 stars. Says, I'm in charge. I got a 2-star coastie. Meanwhile, because we got all these issues in the water, the Coast Guard has surged every single ship on the East Coast they got. The Navy is surging every single small ship they got.
Yeah.
And we were having a military political battle on who's going to be in charge. It went back and forth. It ended up with the assistant commandant of the Coast Guard in charge of the joint task force.
Oh my God.
We ended up with 2 Marine F-4 squadrons deployed out of Cherry Point to Boca Raton to fly cap
Yeah.
over now the Navy ships. Fidel is flying MiGs. We set up a big joint task force command center in Key
Wow.
West. The regiment comes down and becomes the ground element. The first night that we had the seaplane hangar with 1 rifle company, we had Marines in the catwalk. The next morning when first light came, some of the Marielito came to the door, the door you open up in the sliding doors.
Mm-hmm.
We had Hispanic Marines that could speak Spanish. We have problem. What's the problem? Everybody is shitting on the floor. One problem. Second problem, we got 7 dead people. Okay. So
Wow.
I said to the team, let's get the bodies and drag the bodies out here.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 7 dead people, and it was very obvious. One of them might have been a heart attack. One of them might have been exposure.
Mm-hmm.
5 of them were knife wounds. Just you take 20 or 30 uh, shivets or
Mm-hmm.
prison knives to the chest
Yeah.
and the heart and bleed out.
Wow.
So I'm asking some of the guys in the battalion, what's going on? He said, hey, there's some prison guys in there that are getting even. So my sergeant major comes, he says, hey, we got to split the Marielitos between male and female. Brilliant, sergeant major. So all the males go to hangar 2, all the female and kids stay here. Second night in hangar 2, we got 3 dead bodies.
Oh, geez.
I say, sergeant major goes, we got to split and screen the hardcore guys away from everybody else. How do we
Right.
do that? How do we do that? He said, well, for now, we just set up a station, and we'll make a station and office over in this building here. And me and 2 or 3 of the senior staff that speak Spanish, we'll call every male in and we'll interview him. And if we say he's hardcore, he goes in hangar 3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How you going to know? We'll figure it out, sir. So I go and I sit in the back and watch him. And this dude comes in and he's got like 8,000 tattoos around his eyes.
Yeah.
And Sergeant Major goes, hangar 3. So the corporal goes, well, we didn't even interview the guy.
Yeah.
Next guy comes in, there's no tattoos. They ask him, what do you do? Guy says he's a school teacher. They say, who's the king of France or who's the king of Spain? The guy knows it. Okay, hangar 2. Next guy come in, he got tattoos on his hands, right?
Yeah.
Hangar 3. So ultimately, we turned the screening over to an interagency task force.
Uh-huh.
So we have the second problem. We got shit on the deck.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I know how we take care of shit. I've been in the Marine Corps long enough. I've been to Camp Lejeune.
Yeah.
We got no shit in the training area because we got porta-johns.
Mm-hmm.
They go over to the phone booth, open up the yellow pages this thick, look for the biggest porta-john ad of the 15 that are there. The phone
Uh-huh.
book, yellow pages for South Florida.
Uh-huh.
Don's Johns. Wow. Call Don's Johns. Phone it. Don. Hey, Don, you rent Johns? I'm Don of Don's Johns. No shit. I rent Johns. Okay. You take care of construction sites? Yes. Anywhere in South Florida? Yes. All right, I want 200 in Key West. What? He says, do you know where I am? I said, no. So I'm in Tampa. I said, Don, do you want the job or not? I'll take the job. Okay.
Wow.
As fast as you can, 200. So I said, get a couple in here. Get 5 or 10 in here. And, piecemeal them in here. Ultimately, we ended up with, I think, 600.
Oh, wow.
4 hangars. The barracks commodes didn't work. They're World War
Oh,
II seaplane. So we had to put
yeah.
commodes out there for the Marines, right? with signs,
Wow.
Marines, you know, put the Cuban Don Johns inside. Anyway, um, they're starting to get full. Sergeant Major says, "We gonna burn the shitter, sir?" I said, "No." I called Don and I said, "Don, can you suck these Johns?" He said, "I figured you'd be calling me." He said, "Yeah." He said, "I got 4 sucker trucks coming. You know, they're coming down. I didn't even know about this 7-mile bridge highway, right?
Yeah.
From Homestead Airport,
Right.
they're on the 7 mile. They go there, or they're mile 7, whatever, 7 Mile Island, or where.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll see them in 3 hours. I said, okay. I said, keep it up. How long? He said, are you watching TV? Yeah. I said, well, every Cuban that comes here is shitting. Okay, good.
Business is good.
So the Mariel Boat lift ended up with about 175,000
Oh, wow.
Cubans emigrating from Mariel, Cuba to Key West, getting picked up on any number of small boats,
Mm-hmm.
now all coordinated, brought to the seaplane hangar place,
Mm-hmm.
sorted and screened. And then the hardcore prisoners that the interagency task force put out,
Mm-hmm.
they went to the penitentiary in Atlanta.
No kidding. Wow.
The first 35,000 clean Mary Lightos were put on school buses. I ended up renting all the school buses on the Keys after hours. So
Oh,
just
wow.
telling the county bus drivers,
Mm-hmm.
I'll pay you double, we'll pay for the gas, you drive after hours for us.
Mm-hmm.
We moved them to Miami until South Miami said stop. 35,000 sticks in my head. I could be off either direction by 5,000.
Mm-hmm.
So we said, oh, we got to do something. Well, we had the last refugee crisis that the military managed was the Vietnam boat lift of 75,
Right.
where we ended up opening up refugee camps in Camp Pendleton, California,
Mm-hmm.
Indiantown Gap, Maryland, Fort Chaffee, Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
So from that model, we opened up Fort Chaffee and Indiantown Gap. And now we rented planes and we're flying Marielitos in planes to those Southeast Asia hut camps,
Yeah.
where then further screening took place and placement in the population pipeline to filter them into the churches
Mm-hmm.
and sanctuaries that would accept Cuban refugees at the time.
Right.
So it was a 5.5 month operation. I actually went back to my record book last night. I was the first guy in as the first guy in the assessment team, and the last guy out that turned the lights off when the JTF necked down to zero.
Mm-hmm.
5.5 months. And we had one Air Alert Battalion, 1st Battalion, 6 Marines, that was down there almost 5 months. That the
Wow.
Marines got put on we finally got to a 4-section guard in the battalion.
Mm-hmm.
So one section was on Liberty every day, Key
Mm-hmm.
West, Florida for 5 months. One of the 4. So every 4th day, you as a Marine, you went to the beach.
Yeah.
We were there long enough that we had to do a battalion change of command at the Naval Air Station. The outgoing commander was Tom Campbell was sending all kinds of messages. I'm operational. I'm here. we can't do this. Then they were moving them about every 18 months. So
Yeah.
we had a battalion formation, and the new battalion commander came in, Lieutenant Colonel John Jumpin' Jewel, Juul, former quarterback of the LSU Tigers.
Oh,
Another
wow. Okay.
another Vietnam legend. So the message of the lesson of if your Marines have a real world mission, you will have less liberty incidents statistically.
Yeah.
The Marines will train better and you'll have more fun is learned once again when the Air Alert Battalion left Camp Lejeune to do the Mariel Boat lift. They got 5 months of training, lessons learned, how to deal with different situations, how to improvise screening, how to set up a guard. We put sea detachments on every Navy ship. The mine sweep squadron had 12 wooden minesweepers. No berthing areas for Marines. These are little 34-foot things that look like wooden shrimp boats. Staff
Oh, wow.
sergeant and 10 Marines, 11 hammocks, sleeping back on the tail fin, shotguns,
Wow.
pulling Cubans out of the water, fishing all day, grilling fish on the back of the boat. Staff sergeant in command of that Mardet on
Wow.
that U.S. Coast Guard minesweeper or U.S.
Yeah.
Navy minesweeper. So great training. So we see the news today, 700 plus Marines, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines have moved from beautiful 29 Palms, AJ. You love 29
Yeah. Oh,
Palms
yeah.
where you
Good
served.
29. That's
There
right.
you go. Have moved up, of course, to Los Angeles. Those Marines did not make the political decision, but
Right.
they were on the sea bags ready to go. They got additional training to what we used to call riot control, to where
Right.
they got the whole POI, program of instruction, finished at Seal Beach and then redeployed from Seal Beach down to federal buildings. Those Marines will be telling stories. Well, the first story we saw on TV, they tackled the Army vet trying to go to the VA because he was cutting a corner. So the Army vet, good dude, Army vet, heading to the VA downtown, but he put his head underneath a yellow tape to cut the parking lot corner. The Marines took him down, and some reporter got him on film. And so it's an incident that's got to get deconflicted.
Right.
It did get worked out. The Marines and the Army guy hugged it out. He got to the VA. The Marines did not kill the Army guy.
Yeah.
But those
That's
guys
right.
will have stories, just like the Marines from 1-6 that went on the Mariel Boat lift. Every one of them's got a story for the rest of the life.
Absolutely.
And we did get the 2nd Marine Division band, flew down into
Nice.
C-130 for the change of command.
Very
And
good.
because it was so far, they got a 72-hour weekend in Key West.
Oh, that's horrible, man.
Well, I mean, we called the warrant officer that ran the band.
Yeah.
Said, hey, we got to do a change of command in Key West. We got the regimental colors here, the battalion colors, 2 lieutenant colonels. We need the band. We want the whole band. It's Camp Lejeune.
Yeah.
It's in the winter. There's nothing else going on.
That's true. Yeah.
You're going to get the band. We didn't get the 7-man
Yeah.
jazz quartet. We got
That's
the
right.
Second Marine Division Band.
Do you remember who was in charge back then? Who the warrant officer was?
Hey, Jay. No, that's a great question, but I don't go down band trivia. I
Yeah.
don't play musical instruments. I love good music. I love rockabilly, but I'm a rockabilly aficionado, and if you know who Ray Price is,
Oh yeah.
he's my man.
Okay.
He's in a country Western Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Ray Price, World War II Marine,
Mm-hmm.
had been a band leader, swing band, West Texas, pre-World War II, gets back. World War II's over, gets the West Texas Cowboys together again.
Yep.
Post World War II. The trivia question for AJ: his bass player was what Hall of Fame country western superstar?
Hold on. Uh, ah, no, I was gonna say
Okay,
Johnny Cash, but it's not it.
yeah, Johnny Cash is too young for that.
Yeah.
Okay, time's up.
Yeah. Go ahead. Who is it?
17-year-old Willie Nelson.
Ah, dang it! I should have
West
known that.
Willie came out of West
Yeah.
Texas West Texas swing bands,
Yeah. Yeah.
drinking
Yeah.
drinking long neck beers
Mm-hmm.
well before he knew what a roach was. And he was the bass player for
Mm-hmm.
Ray Price, great World War II Marine. Any of you country western fans want to hear a good tenor? Ray Price was a guy, and then we'll leave him alone. Hank Williams' throat would crack all the time later in his short career,
Mm-hmm.
especially when he's doing hardcore alcohol and drugs at the same time.
Yeah.
The guy that came in and sang it all for him, Ray Price,
Hmm.
did all the fill in for Hank
Yeah.
till
Yeah.
Hank,
I love it.
till Hank passed. Okay, uh, we end up and we're done the Mariel Boat lift, and it's springtime, and we're back in Camp Lejeune, and Tom Campbell had taught me that lesson about if you have a mission, then you can train to the mission, and you get to leave Camp Lejeune.
Yeah.
And 1-6 had given up the air alert after they got back to 3-6
Mm-hmm.
and had no mission.
Oof.
And with no mission, you're not getting new troops. And so
Yeah.
one Saturday, I went to the division headquarters up to the 3 shop, and the 2nd Marine Division invented I don't know if I can say what's in this acronym, invented a plan called the TEEP, TEEP. It
Mm-hmm.
went through the Marine, eventually went through the Marine Corps.
Right.
Training, exercise, employment plan, the TEEP.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a TEEP officer in the G3, and the TEEP was classified because it had training deployments and real world deployments on it.
Right.
So it was a secret document kept in a skiff in the 2nd Division, and it had a dedicated officer to keep the TEEP. So I went and visited the TEEP officer, and I said, I'm looking for a mission for 1-6. So he rolls out this TEEP. Oh, got a lot of open ones over here. I said, okay, the mission's got to be in the next 9 months
Mm-hmm.
because we wanted it like right now. Well,
Right.
said, all those missions are taken. He's looking and he said, except for this one. Got one. I said, what is that? Well, it's an exercise nobody wants. I said, what is it? "Yeah, Cold Winter 81. I said, what is Cold Winter 81? He says, once a year we fly a portion of a battalion. We call it a battalion minus. We fly them to North Norway, 200 miles above the Arctic Circle, and we
Yeah.
do a joint exercise with the Norwegians. I said, well, we just got off air alert. We know how to fly. Give it to us. He said,
Yeah.
you sure you can talk for the battalion? I said, give it to us. He gives it to us. I go back. I brief the battalion commander. He says, we got the mission. Good. It changes your status in the computer system for personnel. So now you get new personnel at ITR and new privates in the barracks.
Right.
I mean, new guys to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's morale goes up. You get a mission and you get privates. What better can it be?
Yeah.
The bad news is we're going to North Norway, right?
Yeah. Super cold up there. Yeah, for sure.
We have what's called all exercises have a planning pace.
Mm-hmm.
That's measured by 3 conferences: the IPC, the Initial Planning Conference,
Mm-hmm.
the MPC, the Middle Planning Conference, and the FPC, the Final Planning Conference.
Right.
And that's a conference where everybody in the exercise gets around a table. It says who does what to who.
Mm-hmm.
And the plans are super big at the Initial Planning Conference. And then at the Middle Planning Conference, usually somebody from the physical shop stands up and says, if you volunteer for something, you and your military has to pay for it. Then everybody's big plans get real small.
Yeah. That's funny.
And then you come out of that with a plan that everybody agrees to, a training plan, a unit plan,
Mm-hmm.
a logistics plan, a total plan.
Right.
That's in draft, and you go home, you brief it up and down your chain of command with a budget, and the final planning conference hit the table, sign it in ink, and like your unit, your service, and your country are committed.
Right.
Okay. So.
Well, before we get into that, I think that's probably a good place to kind of take a break from this one, and we'll come back and do another.
Well, you're the boss, man.
Yeah, I think we could do that. Yeah. We'll come back and do another because I mean you have incredible memory of everything that was going on. I mean this is fantastic.
I'm not remembering all the bad news time, just all the good Liberty times.
Well, that's the important times.
Key West, Florida. This episode, 5.5 months, Liberty, Captain Tony's Bar, Key West, Florida.
Yeah.
Next episode, when we go to North Norway, we'll talk about a port called Tromsø. Look it up. It's above the Arctic Circle, but it's a North Norway port. AJ, thanks for listening to an old guy. Remember,
absolutely.
75th anniversary for our Korean Marine vets,
mm-hmm.
and we're always looking for new members for the Marine Corps League.
That's right. That's right. I love it. Mike, you make my job easy. I appreciate it. All right. To all the listeners out there, if you're struggling, need help, anything like that, don't forget the VA has some great resources. You can always dial 988, press option 1. You can always text 838-255, or you can go to veteranscrisisline.net and click on that chat icon. Any of those options will put you in contact with somebody that can help you out. But remember, one veteran life loss is one too many. I care about you. Mike cares about you. The whole veteran community cares about you. So please reach out for help. And if you're out there, you're not struggling, reach out to the buddies that you served with. Ask them how they're doing. And if they need that helping hand, please give it to them. All right, Mike, don't go anywhere. Don't leave me. I want to talk to you after. But to all the listeners out there, stay motivated. Change your socks.